Hey, welcome to Tantra Tuesday. This week I'm going to do something a little bit different and share a little of my backstory. Sometimes people wonder, how did a professional tax accountant end up being a Tantra teacher and coach? And so I thought I would share a little on the journey that I've been on and how that came to be. Because, yes, it's a little bit of a 180. So, my interest in Tantra from a young age, I think, had a lot to do with the confusion around sexuality. I came from a family that was very religious, and looking back, I could see the impact of sexuality under the surface, but in the confines of our paradigm, we weren't really allowed to be sexual beings or to speak about sexuality. And there was only a very confined area where sexuality was allowed to be. But if you're one of those people who's been blessed with a lot of sexual energy, you know that it's not something you can just sort of pack away in a box over here and, open when it's time to have kids and keep it closed the rest of the time. It doesn't really work that way. So here I am living in my very Christian household. Very Christian. Like, school was not an option because they teach evolution there, kind of situation. And I remember I had this little note that I taped beside my bed. And looking back, I was a little seeker. I didn't know what that was. But it was a song from one of the 90s bands, might have been Soundgarden or something. And it said, there must be something pure and there must be something true far away. I felt like there was a higher truth, even from 10, 11, 12 years old. So fast forward, I'm in university and taking some English courses where we had all of these poems and things from kind of old English era, like really dry stuff that you have to write English essays on, right? And for some reason, my essay titles were always things like using sex for immortality or the goddess of the pole, and these really kind of grandiose, way out in left field things. Just a side note, I've started to get into astrology a lot more recently. I've always been into it, but starting to learn how to read my own chart. And it's so cool how all this stuff is in my chart. I had someone tell me, an astrologer in 2012, that I was very tantric and would probably be teaching in these areas. But it's so cool to see it myself and look at where the planets are in the houses and have those moments of, oh yeah, that's why. That's why I chose this path. It's really cool. So, anyways, here I am churning out essays about using sex for immortality in my English 101 class. And kind of entertaining my profs, I think. I think they really loved waiting for my next essay because definitely was not the standard essay. They liked it though. I actually got straight A's on those essays, so they must have been coming from the heart. But after that, I, for some reason, continued on to get a degree in accounting. So I do have a background as an international tax planner, and that took me to a career in a big accounting firm. And it was at this place and this time in my life where I had my first real Kundalini experience. And for me, it was very spontaneous. It happened during lovemaking. And it was like I had just put my finger into a wall socket. We were making love, and all of a sudden, I just got just shocked. And I looked around to see like if there was a lightning storm or if there was an explosion. And I remember just screaming to my partner, "What was that?" And I didn't have a framework for this. I think it's so common for a lot of people that you have these tantric experiences and you have these knowings in your mind like I did, but you don't have a framework. So I started to collect all of these knowings in my mind, all of these experiences in my body, and combine that with a lot of sexuality, I was a bit of a walking time bomb. I remember feeling like a swamp of sexuality, like this really kind of unconscious, kind of dark, clingy energy that seemed like all of my interactions were colored by. It seemed like I couldn't just have a clean interaction with someone. There was always this kind of sexual pull. I was pulling them, they were pulling me. I used to always feel like I was just like or accidentally magnetizing people that I didn't want to. And it was this feeling of like, no, no, no. Like, I can feel that I'm pulling you towards me with my sexual energy, but I really just want you to stay over there. And it was a really confusing time. It really felt like I didn't have control over it, and almost like I was a victim to my own sexual energy. So there came a point where I realized my accounting career was not going to go any further. I was going to be niched in my industry. I love learning. I always have, and that's due to the Mercury in my chart. I'm learning. And so I just wanted to rise to the top, and I kept taking more and more trainings to the point where there was only going to be a handful of companies in the city where I live that could actually employ me, that could actually even have use for someone that was this specialized. And so I had a real heart to heart moment with myself and thought, is this really what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? And the answer was no. The answer was, I'm going to India. I had a really early midlife crisis in my 20s and headed to India. And where I learned very fast, by the way, that most Indians don't do yoga. I had to look so hard for yoga in India. It's not really a thing. It's kind of like this novel, exotic thing that they do for tourists. I had to take a 3-day train and go to a place that I learned later is really dangerous and sketchy just to find some freaking yoga in India. Like, who would have thought, right? But at that ashram, I had a really powerful experience because I learned something called karma yoga. And karma yoga has many shapes and many forms, but it's essentially a devotion of your work. It's a giving of your time and energy without getting anything in return. And I had started to build up quite a strong ego of, oh, I'm so highly educated and I have assistants to do all my work. And here I was with a toothbrush scrubbing little tiles in the bathroom of the shower until each one was clean. And it was such a good moment, such a good wake up call to, hey, you're not that big a deal. And there's much more going on here than the letters behind your name and the credentials and your CV. So from there, I looked and started to search for guidance around what to do with this sexual shroud of confusion that surrounds me. And I looked in all the wrong places. I remember sitting on the top of this hill near the Ganga and asking my monk friend, what am I going to do with all this sexual energy? Do you have any recommendations? I need help. And the look on her face it was just absolute blankness. No idea. It's not something that was taught in her tradition. And it continued like this, me kind of talking to anyone who would listen about my sexual energy like a broken record. And then eventually one day, I was in a little cafe in a city called Rishikesh in the north of India. It's right along the Ganga. And I ordered a plate of bruschetta. Yeah, they had bruschetta at this restaurant. It was a lot of bruschetta. So I thought I would offer it to whoever wanted it in the restaurant. And this beautiful woman took me up on my offer. And we ended up chatting for a long time. And I asked her, like I asked everyone, what to do with this sexual energy. And her answer was, why don't you try Tantra? And she happened to have a friend who was teaching a workshop in just a couple of weeks. So it felt resonant enough for me to hop on a train and travel across the country. It was another 2.5-day long train ride. And when I got to this workshop, I had one of the coolest experiences of my life because it was like the Rubik's Cube of all the colors that I just couldn't seem to line up all suddenly clicked into place. all the things that I'd known, all the things that I'd felt, all the things that I'd been interested in, all the troubles that I had, they suddenly were all held within a context of something called Tantra. And I learned that this thing called Tantra is a history and a philosophy, and that there's books upon books upon books, and lineages upon lineages, and teachers upon teachers, and communities upon communities of people studying this. And it was such a huge moment for me that I knew in that first workshop that this is me now. This is what I'm going to do with my life. This is who I am. This is who I've always been, but I didn't have a language for it. And I so often see this when people come to classes of mine, and I can tell that they're just naturally tantric. They have these experiences. They see the world this way. And it's really beautiful when you have that framework for the inner knowing that you already have. I believe that we're all tantric. And we don't need to even formally discover this thing called Tantra to live a tantric life. But for me, it was so helpful just to organize my thoughts, to organize myself, to realize, oh, I'm not a weirdo. It's just these are tantric experiences. And so after that, I embarked upon a big world tour, staying in all kinds of crazy communities, all kinds of crazy tantric, some people call them cults, learning different styles, traveling to secret teachers in secret towns that wouldn't even teach until all the women were gone from the class. That one really pissed me off, actually. But I had so many experiences, from the very, very esoteric, meditative, secret, almost theoretical aspects of Tantra to the very juicy, free, open community, Osho style, or other different communities where, it was really encouraged that you find a yoni or you find a lingam and you practice with that. And that was your spiritual practice. And I started attending Tantra festivals and seeing how dangerous it can be to go into these places without a foundation. See, I started practicing yoga in my teens, in my late teens. And by the time I came into this world, I already had a solid foundation of where's my spirituality and who am I and what is my boundaries and sovereignty. And I always say, I think we should really be doing yoga for at least 10 years before we go into Tantra. Because I love Tantra festivals, but I had a lot of friends who had hard situations there. And a lot of things that people needed to experience. And I know that's their journey, but for me, it became one of my goals, one of my missions, to create something like a toolkit so that if you have this toolkit, if you have this training, you can go to any Tantra festival, you can go to any tantric community, you can even go to tantric cults if you want, and really retain your center. And that was my biggest takeaway from this period in my life, is how important it is to be able to come into contact with your own delicious core, with your own truth, and act from there. Because Tantra is one word, but it has many meanings. And one teacher will tell you to do something that doesn't resonate with you. And then another teacher will tell you to do the opposite. And you really have to know what is your truth. And you have to always use that as your guiding force, not anything that anybody else says. And that's kind of where my Tantra 101, my full day immersion, was born from. So I wanted to embody and empower everyone with these skills so that they could go out and play and experience all the spectrums of Tantra, all the breath work, all the tantric massage, all the sex magic, all the trataka, the meditating on a dot on the wall, all the sitting in silence, moving the energy up through your central channels, all the beautiful practices that this philosophy has without having to worry. Without having to worry about going down the wrong path or about being caught up in a dynamic where somebody's in a position of power and really not holding that with integrity. And so when I say it's dangerous, I mean that the energies are strong. Tantra is known as a poison path, which means instead of running away from the things that are hard or the things that can harm us, we actually walk straight into them. We ingest that, but we do it in such a way that it makes us stronger, just like homeopathy works. The difference between a medicine and a poison is really just the dose and the strength of the person ingesting it. So before we do these practices, we need to have a nervous system, an internal guidance system, a connection to our inner center, so that we can ingest everything in our path and experience it as a medicine, not as a poison. And where it gets really confusing is when there's someone who has a lot of unresolved traumas or really vulnerable in our sexuality, and we go to something for healing, but the person providing the healing isn't healed themselves. They're caught up in a power dynamic. They're vulnerable to feeling like they get all the attention. They love that attention. And it's a human aspect that we're all capable of. And so I think as a teacher, for me, what's been really important is to put these kind of safeguards in place so that even if I tell you to do something in my workshop, you don't take that at face value. You always check it against your internal compass. And if you've taken my second level Tantra, you know we do a whole workshop on this where we kind of tear apart the old paradigm of there's someone at the front of the class, so therefore you have to do what they say. That's effed. That is old school. That is not the time that we're living in now. The time that we're living in now is there's someone at the beginning or the front of the class. Maybe they have some experience that can be valuable to me. Let me ingest all their medicine and let me be the judge for myself. Which of that I want to keep with me and which I just want to let go in one ear and out the other. We're in a time right now where we are being called to step into our sovereignty. And my goal, my wish as a coach, as a teacher, is to create the conditions where you can access that sovereignty in an easy way. And that I just become a sounding board. I just become a facilitator of your experience of contacting your own wisdom. And I have clients coming to me who just want to know, like, okay, what is it? What is the truth? What is it? And I'm here to tell you, depending on the teacher you choose, even within Tantra, depending on the lineage you choose, you're going to get a different answer to that question. So it's really all, in my opinion, a avoidance strategy from taking the responsibility for our own truth. Tantra is a path of direct realization. Everything in this world is a tool, is an invitation for you to experience the divine directly. Okay, I went off on a tangent. I was telling my story. So I do have a kit, and I teach it in my Tantra 101. And I'm thinking about moving this to online, so keep posted for that. So where were we in the story? Yes, I was going through the festivals. And then I discovered one of my favorite things, which is silent meditation retreats. This is my favorite time frame is a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And these are such great tools for self-sovereignty because you're sitting there with your own wisdom and your own pain and your own memories and your own bliss and your own anguish for 10 days. And it's one of the best things I find that has helped me to connect to my center and has helped me to connect to my delicious core and feel that bliss that's much more than happiness or sadness, but it's that ocean that lies underneath all of it. So that even when you're having a shitty day, you still feel that underlying bliss underneath the surface. This is another reason why Tantra is called a poison path, because even the hard parts of life are embraced as portals to divinity, portals to higher consciousness, portals to deeper love. And this is a big frame shift, you know? It was a big frame shift for me because growing up in a Christian fundamentalist household, it was very black and white. It was very good and bad. And I still struggle sometimes when I feel crappy in a day. I feel lethargic, or I might feel shame coming on for some reason. And I just want it to go away. But in those moments, I come back to the teachings and come back to the embracing of everything as divine, because it is. And there's a way that I can relate to even the emotion of shame in a way that creates more love in my world in that moment, in a way that creates more self-love, in a way that creates a type of bliss, not what you typically imagine when you hear that word, but yeah, it's a type of bliss. It's a deep, deep intimacy with reality, which is really what Tantra is all about. So after going on this journey, I spent 2 years in Asia, and I have gone back every year except for this year to continue my studies. So I started in 2012, and I had a big initiation when I received the guidance to shave my head. Because I had kind of learned the techniques of harnessing my sexuality, of being able to enjoy my sexuality and use it for myself rather than just throwing it all over the place. And that was huge. But then there was a next piece, because there was a reliance that I had on these superficial markers of femininity. And I was being called by spirit to connect with something much deeper than that. And so I felt the call. My inner guru asked me to shave my head, and I had hair about this length at that time. So the process of that happening was really excruciating. I used to get nauseous, like almost throwing up, as I started to imagine what it would be like to actually do this, to actually shave my head. What kind of tantrika would I be? What kind of shakti would I be with a bald head? What kind of pictures would I take? Who would ever be interested in dating me? All of these kind of questions. And they were terrifying. They were really terrifying. And to me, that was a sign that it was something I needed to do, because my identity was too attached to something that's transient, that's really meaningless, that's very superficial. And so I did it. I went to a beautiful temple in a town called Tirupati, and I went on a pilgrimage. My good friend and I walked up, must have been hundreds of stairs, and there were people doing ceremony through the whole trip up the side of this mountain. Beautiful orange flowers everywhere, people bowing. Some people bowed every step. I think it must have taken them at least all day long, maybe longer, because there were a lot of steps. And when we got to the top, I had a ceremony of releasing all of my hair to the god Vishnu, who's the god of preservation, of sustenance, of really making our world go round. And I bicked it. I had a shiny scalp. Everything reflected off the top of my head. And it was honestly terrifying. It was very terrifying. And then I had a new life, because everybody looked at me differently. People treated me differently. And it forced me to go on a journey of digging deep into what is femininity. And I discovered that there were aspects of femininity that I had never touched, like my receptivity. There was a softness that was hiding under there. My ability to be more magnetic instead of just always going for what I wanted and projecting outwards. All these things were lying under the surface of the symbol of what I thought was femininity. And through this, they rose to the top. And that was another big piece of my integration. A few years after that, there was another pivotal moment where I decided I wanted to dedicate myself to working with men. And that's what I do now mostly, is I coach men in my King of Hearts program. And it was something that just happened, where I was asked to witness a story of this beautiful, beautiful man. And he had been trapped in shame for most of his adult life, thinking that he was a monster because of some of the ways that his sexual energy flowed in him, some of the fantasies that he had, some of the impulses that he had felt running through him that he had never even acted on, that he had safely stowed away because he never wanted to hurt anyone. But there was a power there that scared him and that he felt would scare anyone who saw it. And through divine synchronicity, I was asked to witness this man's story. And I was able to show him and to reflect the beauty of himself back to him, and to reflect the divinity of the Ravenger side of us, of this powerful, potent, energetic force that is our sexuality, and that our sexuality comes in all colors of the rainbow. And in Tantra, it's never about not having an emotion or an energy. It's never about this energy is bad, this energy is good. The question is, what are we going to do with that? Even the darkest energies in the world exist in you, and they exist in me, and they exist in the people that you think are bad, and they exist in the people that you think are good. They're there in everything. They're there in religious institutions. They're there with money. They are something that ties us all together. The question is, what are we going to do with them? And the more that we try to pretend, oh, I don't have those dark energies, the more we just compress them, the more we just contract them until they become like an atom bomb or a nuclear bomb, and they just eventually explode. And that's where we can really cause some damage. And so part of the coaching that I do and the shadow work that I do, which is another tool that I use in my tantric practice, is kind of mining out all the energies, teasing them out and forming relationships with them so that even your dark side is something you use to bring love and light to the world. Yeah, it's super effective. There's potency in that. The question is, how does it fit in to the divine order? What is its purpose? And how sophisticated can we be? How many different techniques and methodologies can we learn that can allow us to be shapeshifters of all of our energies, channeling each and every one of them into our greatest destiny, into our greatest love offering to the world? And that's the potential of this work. And that's why I don't do accounting work anymore because I feel like I have so many treasures that I want to share with the world that are infinitely more valuable, in my opinion, than accounting. So this is what I do now, and there's something for everything, you know? That's one of the favorite things about what I've learned is now whatever poison comes at me or whatever challenge comes at me, the question becomes, all right, you know, dig into my toolkit. What am I going to use for this? And there's always something there. So this is a path of sovereignty. And I wanted to share a little bit about how I got to where I am. And maybe you resonate with parts of these stories. And maybe you do feel naturally tantric and you're looking for a paradigm to hold your knowings within. So if so, I'd love to connect, love to work with you. And you can reach me at shamayatantra.com or here on Facebook. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment. It's such a changing time in the world right now, and the balance of powers are shifting. And there's no giving our power away anymore. We're responsible now for our power. So it's up to each of us to do the practices that we need to do, to have a clear mind, a clear head, to have access to our different energies, to have relationship with our body, to be able to walk through the world in a way where we're both loving, empathetic, and powerful. Because if we're loving, empathetic, but we've sheared away our power because we're afraid of what we'll do with it, then somebody else is going to come along and rule your realm, rule your sphere, rule you. Time for us to rise as empathetic, light holding, swords of discernment and empowerment wielding citizens of this planet. Yeah? Are you with me? All right. Thank you so much for being on this. I'm just going to check in with some of the questions here before I close. Yeah. So, Hermes, the best thing to do is to email me at info@shamayatantra.com, or you can send me a private message and I can share with you a path for your explorations. Wishing you a beautiful day, night, afternoon, and I will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.